All right, welcome to Stats. I'm going to look through a process known as finding regression lines using Google Sheets and Desmos. I've done a similar process with Excel, and that is in another video where I ran through that process. And of course, I can do the same thing for just Excel if someone decides they need that. Just reach out and let me know. The process for Google Sheets and Excel is more or less the same. The keystrokes are just a little different, but the terminology is pretty dead on. So it should be a pretty easy switch from one to the other. I'm focusing on Google Sheets because I know that most people would have access to Google Sheets. Not everyone would have access to Excel, so I thought this would be a good place. What I did is I created a dummy data set here. Just 4 or 5 values, I guess 5 values here. And the whole purpose of what I'm doing here is just to demonstrate. This is not real data. It's not connected to anything. I just wanted to have numbers that would work decently well with our purposes, and they were just easy data sets. So I just created this. I'm going to insert a row above here, and I can label these anything I want. I can call this time, and I can call this tree growth. So maybe we're looking at the growth of a tree over years. So this is we can put whatever type of units we want on this. This is measured in, say, we can put that in there and say this is years. And we can call this feet. All right. Yeah, it's a fairly fast growing tree, right? Anyway, so what do we do now? I'm just going to reset that so the spaces look different. I'm going to highlight the data in question. Now, this is not the only way you can do it, but I find this to be the easiest way to do it. And then over here on the right-hand side, now, there are also add-ins you can put into Google Sheets that lets you do a lot more data analysis. So if you're missing any button, you can go do a search for the add-ons and you'll be able to find anything there that you need to add on. There's lots of help menus out there that help you add all this stuff as you need. Google Sheets is really, it's a plug and play and it's very user friendly, a little intuitive, if you will. Anyway, so over here on the right hand side of your screen, about fourth from the right hand side is this little square icon, and you hover on it and you'll say insert chart. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to automatically default to creating whatever the last type of chart that you created was. And the last thing I did was create a scatter chart. Now, if by default it's going to end up coming up as a line graph or bar graph a lot of times. So let's just say it comes up as a bar graph or a column graph is what they're calling it here. You just click on that one and you arrow down to the one that says scatter. We click on that and there's the scatter plot. And we're set. We got the scatter plot. You can look at the data, and remember, one of the first things you always want to do when a data set is you want to look at the data and see what does the data look like it's behaving as. This looks fairly linear. You could get out do the good old pencil test and literally put your pencil to the screen and see if it more or less covers the dots. And that tells you that it's mostly linear. If not, then you know maybe you need to look at a different model. And in the course I'm teaching, we are going to cover other models on how to deal with those. But for right now, I'm focusing on the linear one. So I'm going to click on Customize over here on the right-hand side of my screen. And when I do that, I have a whole bunch of options here. One of them is, and I encourage you to go through here and play with all these, but you click on Series, and you arrow down a little bit. You just kind of scroll down a little bit, and you see this one right here. It's called Trend Line. Excel has a similar thing, and it's called Trend Line is there as well. And when you right click on the chart that you created, you'll have an option to show the trend line. So here I'm going to click the trend line. There's my trend line, and I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And right here where it says label, this is where it's different from Excel a little bit. In Excel, you actually have a box you can check off and say show function or show equation. Here it says label, and I click none. Right now it's on none, but here I can say use equation, and it's going to use the equation as the label, and there it is right there. And then I can also have it show r squared, and again there's r squared. Okay, so there's my slope of 4.54. There's my y-intercept is 6.91. there's my r-squared value of 0.975, and we can take the square root of that and get the r value, and that r value tells us a little bit more information about what we're dealing with here. But an r-squared value of 0.97 is a pretty good indicator that this is pretty good data in terms of it fits the equation fairly well. Again, that doesn't mean causality here. It simply means that the data goes together. The one is increasing as the other one increases, and they increase according to the slope of 4.54. All right, so what we're saying here is the tree is growing 4.5 feet per year is essentially what's going on here. If you look over there, you go from year 1 or year 2 to year 3, and you're going from 15 to 22, which isn't a great fit, but if you keep going through the list there, you'll see how the other values do fit decently well in those with that particular piece of data. Now, the other one I'm going to look at here is the graphing calculator. Okay, so we're just going to click on this, and I'm using, and you can use your TI-84. I don't know the keystrokes for the Casio, but the TI-84, it's a matter of hitting list and putting your list into the calculator, and then going to stats and picking the regression line. It's LINREG, and you tell it which two lists you're dealing with. Here I was going to do Desmos because I know that most people would have access to the internet. If you have access to the internet, you have access to Desmos, so I thought this would be a pretty good one. Now, right here, you don't see a table anywhere. In fact, normally Desmos is going to look like this when you get into the graphing calculator piece. So let me just kind of start from the beginning on this. You're going to go over here and click on the plus sign on the left-hand side of your screen. When you do that, one of the options is going to be for a table. You click on the table, and then you enter your data. And I'm just going to keep the data really simple. And I'm just going to enter in some other values. So let's say 12, 23, 31, 48, and 50, I don't know what, 57. Okay. Now, you can kind of see I spaced my x's out by 1s, and I spaced my y's out by roughly 11. 10, 12, somewhere in that realm. That they don't all perfectly fit, but they do. They all are in there. Now, when you look at over here, you're like, well, there's no data over here. How do I actually create the scatter plot on this? Desmos does it for us automatically. If you grab and move the screen around, you should see the values appear. Now, the thing is, I moved it over and you still don't see them. There's actually 112 right there, and if you keep going up like that, you would see all of them appear. So we don't have our window big enough. So I'm going to click over here on the right-hand side of the screen. There's this little tool-looking thing. It's actually a wrench-looking piece. And it says, and you hover on it, it says Graph Settings. You click on that, and then you can change your settings here. Now, my X values will get that's all the X values I need, but it's actually a little too big. So I'm actually going to reduce that to go from, say, -1 to 8 there. Okay, now my Y values are the problem. I'm going to go from -1, but I need to make sure I go high enough. And my largest Y value is 57, so I'm going to go up to 60, which would be just a little bit bigger. Right now, I have all of my data points on there. And they look to be pretty solidly linear. Okay, again, I could put my pencil down and see them. So, and we did that again by going to graph settings and resetting my window there. Now what? Well, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to here. Oh, by the way, you can also, there's this little plus sign right here with a magnifying glass. That's zoom fit, and that will automatically reset your window so you can see the data that you entered. So that's the easy way to do it. I showed you the hard way because that's the way I prefer to do it, because then I can kind of lock in what I want the values to be. But anyway, so now what I want to do is I wanted to have the system create the linear regression line for me. So I'm going to do, now notice my table here, it has x1, y1. So what I'm going to use here is I'm going to do y1. Notice it automatically made that one a subscript for me, which is pretty cool. And then I'm going to do this little curly line right here. A lot of times you find that on your keyboard, you find that next to 1, okay? And it goes by a couple different names, but I call it the little curly thing, because that's really a technical term. And then I'm going to do m x sub 1, and then I'm going to do plus b. Now, it automatically gives me everything I need. It gives me my slope of roughly 11.5, which is what I kind of based my y values on when I created that dummy data set right there. It told me I have a y-intercept of -0.3. And it told me my R squared value is 0.98 and my R value is 0.99. 0.99 means this is a dead solid fit. We can most definitely assume that this data is linear and that these two pieces have a correlation between them. Doesn't mean they have causality, it means they have a correlation. So we can look at the data and we can see that there are a couple of pieces that are a little bit off, but nothing terribly off. And then there are these residuals, and that's a whole nother discussion that we'll have at another point in another video. But that's how you create regression lines in Google Sheets and in Desmos. Again, the process is very similar in Desmos and in a graphing calculator, and the process is very similar in Google Sheets as it is in Excel. There's a way to do this in numbers as well for anybody who are Mac users and use numbers. I'm not clear on those keystrokes, but I bet if you do a quick search, it'd be very easy to find. All right, I hope this was useful and helpful. Let me know additional points and comments and questions you still have. Take care.